Life is full of ups and downs, but through it all, you can never give up. One woman knows that firsthand. Coming up, her amazing story of survival in this episode of Arroyo Live. Hello and welcome to another episode of Arroyo Live. I'm your host, LaTonya Norton. Today's guest is an award-winning filmmaker, playwright, author, comedian, actor, and a domestic violence survivor. She is Lorinda Hawkins-Smith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you, because I went through a long list of titles. So you have a lot. You are a woman who has done a lot. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, I like to think of myself as an artivist, and that's because I am an activist, but I like to bring awareness through my art. I like to combine the two. And being a domestic violence survivor, of course, I'm an advocate for the survivors, but I think it's important to look at both sides of it, the abusers and the abused, because I feel like if we villainize the abusers, it's like it makes it difficult to find solutions and have healthy discussions, because I'm about restorative justice and yeah.
So you like to take that holistic approach, that
Yes.
360 approach.
Yes, I like to take the 360 approach because it's very nuanced, and just like homelessness, there's not just one solution. You have to address many causes. So I feel that's the same way with domestic violence. It's complicated, and if people are willing to take the time and a compassionate look at both sides, then I feel like we can move forward and maybe combat it in a healthy way.
Now, Lorinda, we learned about you through the mayor's prayer breakfast. Tell us how you got involved with the Urban Voices Project, the Skid Row Choir.
Yes. Okay. Well, I got involved with the Urban Voices Project actually pretty recently, during the pandemic. I'd say 2020, 2021, around that time, I was asked to be a guest artist at one of their neighborhood sings. And they still have the neighborhood sings every Wednesday afternoon. You can go there physically, but they also have the option to Zoom. So I was Zooming in as a guest artist. And it was then that Liav Sofer, one of the co-founders, said, you know what, it would be great if you could join us, as a choir member. And I was like, oh, that's nice. All that.
That sounds like one of those, yeah, but no. Is that what that was?
Yeah, because I'm very active in the Skid Row community, still have friends and community there. But I didn't know if that was what I was supposed to do. Because I sing in my choir, Pasadena church, or what have you. And I just don't like to commit to something unless I can do it wholeheartedly. So I am also a believer. So I like to think I would be led by the Spirit. So I feel like God kept putting it in front of me. Like, what about this? Remember this invitation, this offer? So I thought I would check it out. When the restrictions were loosening, I went there in person to one of the neighborhood things. And it was just such a blessing. And it really felt like I was in the right place. Liav talks about how music is healing, and I believe it. I have witnessed it even before Urban Voices, the arts are very healing. And so every time I would come, it was that type of feeling, like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And it just felt like home.
Yeah.
And just the natural progression of things. They were like, hey, would you be willing to fill this position? And I did have to like audition and do a little tests and again, and here I am. So when the prayer breakfast came up, it turns out that Liav knows Rabbi Joshua of Friends Indeed. And Rabbi Josh invited Liav, and Liav was like, I know somebody from Pasadena. So he wanted to make sure that my schedule was clear enough that I could definitely be present at that. And when he told me about it, I'm like, are you kidding? Yes. And it's so funny because unbeknownst to Liav, even now, I haven't even told him, but I had actually met Rabbi Josh even before the prayer breakfast, because when I came back to Pasadena after living in LA for a time, I became involved with housing justice groups. So I was with a housing justice group led by Jill Shook, and I actually worked with her. And at one of the housing justice events, ran into Rabbi Josh and just met him then. I don't even know if he remembers, but I remember.
A full circle moment.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure, because I mentioned a lot of accolades. I mentioned a playwright, comedian, actor, filmmaker, domestic violence survivor, but you were also homeless.
Yes.
How long were you homeless?
Whew. So unfortunately, I've been homeless a few times.
Okay.
The time that I reference on my website was during a period roughly 2006 to 2007, almost 2008. And homelessness looks like different things, because I count sleeping on somebody's couch as homeless.
Yeah.
Living in your car, homeless. But when I was homeless in Skid Row, I would say that was a few months. And I say in Skid Row because I wasn't living on the street. I wasn't living in a tent on the street or just on the street. I was in shelters. I was in shelters, and then I was in an SRO, single room occupancy hotel, which is usually, where one goes when they're transitioning from being homeless to housed. I say that, but then at the same time, SRO housing is also used for residents who are low income. But for me, it was a time of transitioning into a more stable type of housing.
You were homeless off and on for how long?
So my first time experiencing homelessness, I'd say was after my mother passed, shortly after my mother passed, in 2002, 2002. And I was able to stay with friends. I was able to stay with friends. So I would say that period, again, felt like a few months, but homelessness is traumatic. So it was a few months, but it felt like so much longer. And then there was a period after separating from my husband because of domestic violence, and I was homeless again. And so when I look back, thank you for asking the question. When I look back, I noticed that it's been domestic violence that has actually made me become homeless, because the first time I became homeless was in Pasadena. I was born at Huntington Memorial when it was Huntington Memorial and not Huntington Hospital, but I was raised in the foothills of Pasadena. And when my parents became older, well, my mother passed in 2000, and my father was diagnosed in his latter years as bipolar. And sometimes in certain episodes, he would be violent. So I was forced to leave because he refused to take his medication. And I had my little son, my 3-year-old son at the time, with me, and I needed to keep us both safe. So that's what made me homeless the first time, because we were living with my parents at the time. But
So you became homeless with your son, the two of you?
Yes, the first time. That is correct. That is correct.
Now, throughout bouts of homelessness, it's amazing to note that you actually completed your MBA. You were able to gain an MBA from the University of Phoenix while homeless with your son. How in the world? How in the world did you do that?
To that answer, right. To that answer, I say, but God. No, but literally, I am a believer, woman of faith, and I believe it was God that saved me. I should be dead right now from the choices I was making, which ended up in my marriage, my first marriage. And it was domestic violence. And I didn't recognize it as domestic violence because it didn't start off, as physical abuse or anything. It was gaslighting. It was emotional, psychological, and it culminated to physical. And that's what almost killed me. And I heard the voice of God tell me what to do to get free. And he saved my life. And I felt like, well, in return, the least I can do is give my life back to him the best way I can, which is to actually obey when I hear his voice and not just laugh it off, thinking I'm just being overly sensitive or I'm being silly. I was like, oh, so that is your voice, and I will follow it. And his voice told me to go back to school.
Wow.
His leading told me to go back to school. And the first time I did that was University of Phoenix, and I got my bachelor's. And I realized at that point that I was not an online learner. That was not my forte. The first class I took online, I did fail. So I was fortunate enough at that time to know that there was a physical campus right near me in Pasadena. And that was about 2004 at that time. And I loved it. I loved going. But at that time, I tried to use the library's computer. To do my work. And
whatever resources.
You need your own. So, but then you're at the mercy of the library's hours to complete assignments. So that's partly why I failed the online class. But when I was getting my master's few years later, I was transitioning from an SRO into stable housing. And during that time, I was applying for student loans and grants, whatever Pell grants, whatever federal grants were available. With that money, I was able to invest in a computer to basically do the assignments. I would still go to the physical campus, but I knew I needed the computer. And can I tell you, I was so happy I waited to go back to college because, it is so much more easier to complete your assignments rather than going through those index cards at the library. And oh my goodness.
Encyclopedias, all of that.
Yes.
Just click send, it's submitted, you're good.
Right. Just Google search, where do
Yeah,
I find this area of study, and then find those documents and read from there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, how old was your son at this time when you're getting your master's and you're at the mercy of the library hours and all of that?
Well, these were two separate times. At the mercy of the library hours was when I was getting my bachelor's, and he was around 9 years old around
Okay.
that time.
Okay.
So when I was getting my master's, he was at that time with his father.
Okay.
So I have two different children, two different fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so his father, he was living with his father at that time.
Wow.
And he was in high school, and then he came back to living with me. Such a long story. I'm so sorry,
No, no.
but yeah, he came back to living with me, um, and I was in Skid Row again because I got married again to a gentleman who was a property manager of housing in Skid Row, and knew him for 7 years. We worked in the church together, and I prayed. I was like, "Am I supposed to go back to Skid Row?" And Lord, is this you? And I went back to Skid Row to live in SRO housing that he was managing, and my son lived with us and graduated from Muir that
Wow.
year, and made it in and went to Berkeley. And
That's
yes.
awesome. That's awesome. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, in that
Sure.
the fact that homelessness looks different. It
Yes.
doesn't look stereotypical. A lot
Right.
of us think of the tent on the sidewalk, or,
Mhm.
something like that. Someone just living on the streets. Maybe it's not even a tent, just curled up on a bench at the bus stop. But it
Right.
can be someone's house. It can be living in your car. It could be all these different things. And it's interesting
Right.
because, one of the greatest lessons my mother ever taught me is to leave. If you're in that domestic violence
Mhm.
situation, to
Mm,
get out.
right.
That is such a great lesson. And that's why I asked, how old was your son? Because I'm sure, you know, at some point your son knew, kind of what was going on, or, felt the tension or heard the fight or something like that. So it's
Right.
one of those things. And for me, it's so important because I think to myself, had my mother not left that situation, I would have thought that was the norm. If she stayed there,
Come on.
I would have thought, okay, well, this is what it is. You're supposed to stay and you're supposed to take it, but you're not. And I'm
Right.
so glad that she left. I'm just so glad.
Hmm.
I'm glad you left. And I just want to encourage, and maybe you're the better person to do it, but encourage people to leave, find a way. We just lost the great
Hmm.
icon Tina Turner. We all know her story.
Right.
And
Right.
it reminds me of something that happened in my childhood. So what would you say to those women who are maybe in that situation? Maybe they haven't left, maybe their kids
Right.
are there.
Right.
You
Well, one thing we don't talk about is that the most dangerous time for a victim is after they do leave.
know?
And there just needs to be better support, because um, because I've experienced it quite a few times, homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
and was an advocate telling victims to do X, Y, Z. And then I had to go and experience it again to realize, oh, is this what it is? Because
Right.
unfortunately, the last time that I did have to leave, I had a job, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. So I left, but then I called certain domestic violence shelters, and some of their criteria to be there was I would have to quit my job. I couldn't have any ties to anything. And maybe it was a safety issue or what have you.
Oh,
But in order to be in certain, not all,
yeah.
certain shelters, you have to enroll in their programs, and that's a full-time job.
Wow.
And that was a wake-up call to me. I'm like, it's not that easy. It And then I just want to say more so to people who know or have friends or family members who are going through it and wondering, oh, what can I do? I just want them to leave. They need to leave.
Yeah.
I would just say it's so important to just be there for them and
Yeah.
let them do it in their own time. Let them know that you are there, because I was watching Tina Turner. It's so interesting you bring that up. It was like a Tina Turner documentary marathon I watched last night. And it was just so interesting because she addressed those people who said that she was foolish to even be in a domestic violence relationship or marriage. And she said that actually she thinks that she was smart to be able to have been in it. And when she talks about it, I mean, she was there for years before she actually left. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily something that will happen overnight. You do have to be smart in how you get out. So I would just speak to women and men who might be in the situation to be writing your escape plan.
Yeah.
Keep it in a place where your abuser won't see it.
Plan it
Yes, plan it out. If you're able, have different separate bank accounts.
out. Mm-hmm.
Have your documents ready.
Yeah.
Documents, I mean, the children's birth certificates, have your own documents in case you do have to flee. Any police reports, have copies of those. There's so much, but there are places like even right here in Pasadena,
Mm-hmm.
Shepherd's Door, shout out Linda
Yeah.
Ofrey.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had known about them when I was going through in Pasadena, but Shepherd's Door, I do now know of them, Domestic Violence Resource Center. They are amazing.
Wow.
And they
Good
can
information.
help, yes, they can help the victim and the alleged abuser as well. They do wonderful work.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. So
Definitely.
prior to being homeless, you had an acting
Mhm.
career, right?
Yeah, yes, I sure did.
What
I,
shows were you on?
you know what? I had small bit roles, the Wayans brothers, um, Living Single, I got my first line on.
Okay.
Yes. And I don't know if you remember a show called Strong Medicine. Whoopi Goldberg produced it.
I I saw a clip of you in that. You were a nurse,
Yeah.
short
Yes.
hair. I saw
ER
that.
nurse,
Yeah.
dyed copper. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I saw
Yes.
that.
Right. So it was commercials and
Yeah.
bit parts, and yeah, so I'm back in it now, and just my first love is theater though,
Yeah.
and I discovered social justice theater big time when I was in Skid Row, and that really resonates to me. And so I tend to pick my projects, theatrical and otherwise, with that bent, looking at,
Yeah.
okay, how is this helping? What are we bringing awareness to? Type of type of
Theater
deal.
with a purpose, right?
Yes, theater with a purpose.
I love that. I love that. So theater is your first love. Is that
Yes,
where I think I saw a one woman show.
yes, and I'm wearing a sweatshirt,
I can't see it. It says
Justice
justice
or Just Me.
or just me. What does that
Yes.
mean? I can tell what it means,
Right.
but for people who may not understand.
Exactly. So Justice or Just Me is my book and play trilogy based on my journey as a domestic violence survivor.
Mm.
And just a side note, This sweatshirt was made by Steve Sneed of Made in Bina. Shout out.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, he did a great job with this sweatshirt.
I love
But
that.
yeah, and it's a play on, is it really justice or is it just me? What happened? Because I was married to a white man,
Mm-hmm.
and when I called for help, I was the one who got arrested and went to jail. Yeah, so I look at that as like, was that justice or just me?
That
So,
happens a lot.
too
Now that
much.
part wasn't just you, because that happens a lot, right?
Right?
Like Autumn, you are guilty until proven innocent just because of the color of your skin. Walk me through that. What happened? How did that happen?
Yeah. So what? Right. And then, spoiler alert, a lot of it is in the book, but
Okay.
much of it has to do, from my perspective and my experience, it was because of the OJ Simpson um,
Okay.
case. I was told that the police at that time, which was around 2003, 2004, yeah, that if they get called on a domestic violence charge or call, they have to arrest somebody. So the person who has the marks on them, they would assume is the victim. And that's what it would appear how they were operating at that time.
So when
So
police got there, he had marks on him.
self-defense marks,
Oh, okay.
self-defense marks. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
And you didn't have marks.
No, because he is a fifth degree black belt martial arts person who knows how to not leave marks and would tell me that he knew how to
Uh,
harm and not leave marks and so forth. Yeah, it's a lot.
okay.
And then I learned about narcissism
Mm.
because I went back to school. And then I went back to school and I read about narcissists and I was like, oh, that's what he was. that's that's what I was
Yeah.
experiencing. So it was
Hmm.
not just domestic violence, it was narcissistic abuse, which in a lot of ways is more damaging than even physical abuse because, oh my goodness, the emotional and psychological, just, I mean, the gaslighting and
Yeah.
making you think that you're crazy, and it's like, okay, and making you just doubt
All the
yourself
passive
all the time.
aggressive, all of that. Got it. Got it. Wow. That's a
Yes,
lot.
it's a lot.
But
But
you're
during
here.
the pandemic, yes, during the
And you,
pandemic,
go ahead.
I got real creative, and that's
Okay.
when I pushed the book out, made a short film, got so creative. But I had been sitting on the Justice or Just Me story for many years, had been just performing a 10-minute monologue. And then I finally completed the first full length show in the trilogy 2021. And it's Justice or Just Me, The Bite, The Fight, The Flight. And 2021, The Bite came out, the book
Wow.
and the play. So book number 3 is due to come out this summer, The Flight.
It sounds like this is therapeutic.
Yes.
You, when you have all of this in you and you're creative, I can tell I'm a creative. It's obvious. It has to come out in some way. Just give me a stage, give me a microphone, let me go. Like when you have so much, when you're creative and you have so much built up, it has to come out. And it looks like, you know, some people, if you're a recording artist, it'll come out in your music. Hello,
Mm,
Mary J. Blige. You know what I mean? It's just whatever it
yes.
is you do and you're an artist, it comes out. How therapeutic was this for you to get this out?
Oh my goodness. When I found myself in Skid Row, I experienced culture shock because it was like, Lord, what did I do to deserve this?
Right.
I thought I was following you. I don't understand. And when I was able to just humble myself and get over that and realize to be a missionary, you don't have to go to another country. You can go to your own neighborhoods. I opened my eyes and saw that there was this rich theater community in Skid Row.
Mm-hmm.
And it was social justice theater. And that's when I started writing my story, and they gave me a place to perform it. And that's when I felt like I had a voice, because LaTonya, I mean, the police, my experience was the police weren't listening to me. You know, the justice system wasn't listening to me. Family court wasn't listening to me. Nobody was listening to me. It was like I had no voice. So to come to Skid Row, a place where people are supposed to be invisible, to actually find my visibility is kind of ironic. And when I tell you, it was so cathartic.
Yeah.
Especially performing it and then getting the feedback that I would get in
Isn't
return.
that what it's all about? Isn't
Yes.
it just to know that I was seen, I was heard, I was received? Like these are my people. This is where I'm supposed to be. And you bloomed where you were planted.
Right where I was planted, because isn't that what we're supposed to do? No matter where you're planted, that is where. And that's when I discovered, by sharing my story in hopefully an entertaining way, that I wasn't alone. You know, I heard a lot of people say, you know what, this is my story too. You need to finish it. You put it out there, and all that encouragement. And I feel like even if you're not in a domestic violence situation per se, I feel like we all have some sort of trauma that we're overcoming in some way, because especially the pandemic. I mean, collectively, we all experienced that trauma.
Wow. And you're the choir. Are you the director now?
I am one of the choir directors of UVP, Urban Voices Project.
That is amazing. That is amazing. You went from, yeah, but no, to one of the choir directors.
That's hilarious when you put it like that. Yes. Well, and it's kind of similar to this musical I'm in, called Because It's Sunny in LA, especially on Skid Row. It's a musical bringing awareness to homelessness. And it's, oh my gosh, opening weekend is this weekend in Hollywood.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yes, yes.
I want to come
Hollywood.
see it.
Oh my goodness. Don't tease me.
No, for sure. And when I come, I'm going to make sure you
it.
see that I'm there. I'm not just saying this.
Yeah.
I want to come see it.
Thank you, because that's also sad when people come and they bounce out and you don't even know they were there until later. And you're like, why did you say that to me?
No, I definitely.
Yes. But similarly, with this project, I had heard about it, you know, and I'm like, yes. And I knew the producer because we have the same circle, you know, Skid Row artists, what have you. Didn't know him too well, but we were Facebook friends. So I just would tell him, yes, I'll support, I'll share your information out, share your posts that you're casting or what have you. But I didn't think that I would be involved in it until I think it was when they were having callback auditions and they were recasting. So I had missed the whole first bout of casting, but then the second time they were casting for certain roles, one of the actors is in UVP, Urban Voices, and he brought flyers saying, hey, you know, and I overheard him saying, yeah, it's an equity musical. And I was like, huh? It's paid? Oh, why didn't anybody tell me that?
Ding, 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 ding.
Right. So, because I mean, I've done so many free things. And, I'm not trying to be homeless again, so
That part.
here, right. So I just said, okay, well, Lord, if this is you, let me just audition. And I ended up getting one of the leading roles. I'm like, wow. So,
That's
and here we
amazing.
are. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So what else do you
Yes.
have coming up? You mentioned you have the play that's coming.
Yes. Yes.
And
Coming.
then part 3 of your trilogy as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
The
That book,
Flight.
The Flight. Yes. I'm also doing writing workshops at La Pintoresca Library in Pasadena,
Okay.
and also Altadena Library, both Juneteenth weekend, June 17th.
Awesome.
That's Saturday. I'll be doing writing workshops, liberating your voice, finding your voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I really feel like that's healing. So um, doing that. And I'm involved with Peace Over Violence, another domestic violence organization. I'm on the advisory circle,
Wow.
formerly advisory board, now advisory circle. So
You're
just
doing it
trying to
all.
stay the, I'm doing too much.
No, no. Now you also did a movie called The Virus.
Yes, that's
Tell me
a
about The
horror.
Virus.
Thank you. It's a horror comedy. During the pandemic, I was getting back into stand up. So I was doing stand up Zoom comedy. So Flappers Comedy Club in Burbank
Mm-hmm.
had a 48-hour film festival challenge. And I thought, you know what? Let me try it. So I showed up via Zoom and got my topic, and the topic was slasher film. But my mind was made up. No matter what it was, I have these props that I made, and I was going to force it into whatever genre it was going to give me. But slasher films is right up my alley because my birthday is Halloween, and I was
Oh,
like,
really?
yes, yes.
Cool.
So I was like, okay. So the guidelines were 5 minutes, and 48 hours is the limit. The due. It would be due that Monday. So I got so carried away. I set up all these shots and different angles. And then I remembered, oh, I can do the musical score myself. And then I ran out of time. So I fell into a depression. I'm like, what?
Oh, no.
Oh no, oh no. And then I heard the Spirit of the Lord say, finish it anyway. And I was like, oh yes, I can finish it anyway. And that way I thought, okay, well, I'll do a 5 minute version because that was first required. And then I will do an 8 minute, 46-second version in honor of George Floyd. So that I love the fact that I had that freedom to do. So then I had a friend, I call her my Kwanzaa guru.
Okay.
My first time celebrating Kwanzaa was over the pandemic, and she encouraged me to do a Zoom screening of my film when I finished it. And I was like, okay. And it just happened to happen on the day of creativity. I believe that's Kumba. Um, so yeah, just people encouraging me. And then the next step I saw was film festivals. Should I really submit this to film festivals? Because I shot it all on my phone and my computer. I'm like, really? So I did, and I ended up winning like 9, 10, I believe, technically 10, technically 10
That's
wins.
amazing.
So amazing.
That is
So
amazing.
amazing. So amazing. Because the first win, I was I was teaching as a theater teacher at a school, and I got a notice from Oregon Film Festival, Oregon Scream Week, that my film was nominated and would be screened in their film festival and up for an award. And I thought, oh, that's nice. That's great. And my friend, my teacher friend, she was like, you're not going to go? It was one of the few festivals that was having a physical screening during, this pandemic time. So I felt like, well, there's no way I can go to Oregon, the money and what have you. And I think, well, as God would have it, you put it out there. Well, okay, I want to go. This is what's happening. I want to go. And I had a friend of mine who, there's a few of us who met at a WA conference, Western Arts Alliance conference. And we all, well, with the exception of one of us, were diversity, or not diversity, but scholarship recipients. We stayed in touch. Anyway, Sharon heard about my situation, and she's just like, let me give you the money. I trust, come on, it's a good investment. And basically she was saying she was paying it forward because she's an artist too. And somebody did that for her. And she lives like in Washington. So by me flying up there, we were able to connect. I was able to stay over her friend's house, and she went with me. And lo and behold, I win. And so she's in the picture.
Of course you did. That's the only thing that makes this story even more unbelievable, was that you would win.
It was like, are you kidding?
Of course
IMDb. It's like crazy. IMDb, and amazing. To God be the glory.
I love it. I love it. God be the glory. Well, I mean, you have an amazing story. I mean, it's a roller coaster. It's up and down.
Yeah.
But I have to find out what keeps you going, because you mentioned depression a minute ago, and you said you didn't, you're kind of a little depressed, but then you did this. Like, how do you, because it happens to us all, how do you not just sit in that dark place? How do you pull yourself up and keep going?
Yeah. I journal. I journal, and I think it's normal, if you get sad, or it's just, if you stay there, it's really important to try not to stay there. And what helps me not stay there is when I can look back and see all the other times that God provided, or God, showed up in when everything just seems so bleak. There was the ram in the bush, and it's like, why do I not feel like it would happen again? I feel like we have such short-term memories, right? Mm-hmm. But in the Old Testament, it makes sense why they were always building monuments or memorials to remember, this is the time that God helped us do this. And, maybe it would be rocks, maybe it would be a statue, what have you. But I feel like the least I can do is try to write it down. Like, even if it just seems insignificant, just every day, I just try to write down. I'm not saying I'm faithful, perfect or faithful with it. I try to be faithful. Yeah. But if I can just write and not even look back necessarily, because what am I going to do? Think, okay, on this day, I'm going to look and see what happened. But if once I start writing, I feel like then I start remembering. This reminds me of that time when this happened, and oh yeah, and this is what happened during that time. Yeah. And I felt similarly, and it looked like there was no way out but God, and I feel like he sends people our way, and he sends angels our way. And I know when we look at the news, there's something horrible to see every day, but even in the midst of that, there's still good. There's still good happening. And if one of my favorite quotes is, evil prospers when good people do nothing. So I feel like
I like that.
Yeah, if
evil prospers when good people do nothing.
Yeah.
Because evil is always busy.
Always.
Yeah. Got that.
But yeah, if we can just not do nothing.
Mhm.
And or just know that when you feel like doing nothing, that there's somebody out there who is doing something, and you're just not alone with what you're going through.
Absolutely.
Just remember. Yes.
I love that, Lorinda. Now, you have a connection to Pasadena. Tell me a little bit about Pasadena and how you know the mayor.
Yes. I know the mayor because we both went to Wilson Junior High in eighth grade, but but when I was working with those housing justice groups,
Mhm.
um, we were on different sides of certain issues. It's funny, when I came back to Pasadena in 2017, I mentioned that I became involved with the housing justice groups,
Right.
but I was in District 5, and Victor Gordo was my councilman.
Mhm.
And we would constantly try to reach out to him to talk to him about, at that time, ADUs, accessory dwelling units,
Mhm.
and the regulations to actually be able to make one were just ridiculous. So we
Mhm.
were fighting for better regulations on it. And we would butt heads. So I would show up at council meetings, share my testimony, and he would send me an email, encouraging me as a domestic violence survivor, telling me how strong I was, but telling me the housing issue was complicated. And I'm like, what?
You're like,
But
look, I knew you in eighth grade.
right? You better talk to me. You better.
It ain't complicated. I'm joking.
Right. What's complicated? No. But he does a lot of good work, and
I'm sure.
I'm so thankful for um, Fair Oaks and Orange Grove. We
Mhm.
fought for that property to be mixed use, is the compromise, because we wanted the funding to be used for affordable housing, especially for our veterans, our homeless veterans, and nobody should be homeless, especially our veterans. So
No.
the compromise was at least, okay, mixed use. So there's some business, some residential, and at least the residential will be maybe permanent supportive housing or affordable. So, he's part of that. So he's doing his thing. So
Good.
we we
Working,
we made a
working
truce.
together.
Right, we made a truce. I think, especially at the mayoral breakfast, and when he's so funny. He knew me as Lori,
Okay.
so but yeah, I'm Lorinda now.
Lorinda. I
So
love that.
yeah, but yeah, so funny. So when you talk about full circle
For
moments,
sure.
and
And
then giving us that plate, that was just an amazing gift.
and as I listen to your story, I hear that just about, you know, every time something that was part of your purpose, every time it presented itself, it sounds to me like you kind of ran from it. You weren't really
Yeah.
sure. You ran from this choir for a while, even though it was exactly what you needed to do and where you needed to be.
Right.
And I think that that's so typical, not just of your story, but
Mm-hmm.
so many of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is, but I hear that a lot.
But I will say, I
Mhm.
believe there is a timing issue, though.
Yes.
I Because when I hear about the journey of this choir, I
Mhm.
feel like it had to have been now. And if it would have been before, I don't know if I would have been able to stay, just in the growing of it and the
Yeah.
shaping of it. So I trust God's timing as well,
Timing
because
is everything.
yes, and when you have made, wrong decisions and wrong moves,
Mhm.
especially in
Mhm.
relationships, you don't want to just, rush into decisions, even in business or what have you. So I do think there is some value in just, being kind of taking your time with things, just trusting that, there will be a confirmation if that is for you to do. Yeah.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Who are some of your role models, and who helped you kind of turn
Oh,
things?
oh my goodness. Well, I gotta say, Miss Bridget Biddy Mason is a huge hero of mine. And when I learned of her story, being an enslaved woman who won her freedom in court and then went on to be an entrepreneur and one of the founders of downtown LA's financial district,
Really?
blew my mind. Yes, and founder of First AME Church,
Oh, wow.
Biddy Mason. And I'm honored to be able to portray her in downtown LA Central Library on their video wall. They have historical figures, and she is one. And
That's
it's
awesome.
it's a motion picture clip of her, but it's slowed down to look like it's just a portrait. But if you look long enough, she moves. Anyway, but her story really encourages me. Um, there's so many. I just
Yeah.
can't think of them, but she's the main one.
And you know what? I do not doubt for one second that you are someone's role model.
Oh,
I don't doubt that for one second, because the heroes, the sheroes are not always on television or in books. They're in our neighborhoods, they're in our communities, they're
wow,
sitting right next to us at church. We see them.
wow.
They're the ones that we can actually touch, you know?
Yes,
Sometimes you may not even know it until years from now. Some little girl will say, I was watching you and I observed you and I saw how you did this and I saw and just looked up to you. You never know
right.
who's watching.
That's amazing, and that's true. And I just want to shout out to Mayor Karen Bass. I love the work she is doing with
Yes.
Inside Safe. She's doing more than I gotta say, others who previously had her seat. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I
And just,
appreciate that.
thank you for saying that. I totally agree. And I just, encourage everyone to keep the homeless community, you know,
Mm,
in mind. Once again, you don't know how homelessness looks. You'll have
that's
no
right.
idea. No
That's
idea.
right.
Just because a person is going to school or going to work and showing up and doing all the things, you just don't know, right?
Doing all the exactly. And there are so many students, college students, that are homeless.
Yeah,
It's just struggle's real.
it is
Struggle's
real. So on your website, there's a quote that I
real.
love, and it says
Mhm,
that while transitioning from homelessness to housed, as we
mhm,
mentioned, you were able to complete your master's program, you gained your MBA
mhm.
from the University of Phoenix. And you know where I'm going with this, where you
Yes.
where you truly feel like a phoenix rising from the ashes. I love that quote. And I don't think there's any better way to describe your story.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I don't know if you have any last words, or, I would love
you.
to maybe kind of go out and listening to the choir. Maybe
Mm.
we can do that. But tell me, do you have any last words or anything on your heart or something you want to say before we close? Because this has been my pleasure.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And you just moved me when you threw that back at me. I wasn't expecting that quote. But because it's sunny in LA, especially on Skid Row, the musical opens this weekend um, for 7 performances, two of which, the 9th and the 23rd, I'm going to have a book signing even after those performances. It's at the Hudson Theater on Santa Monica
Okay.
in Hollywood. And I just really want to give a shout out because, yeah, it's also a dark comedy. So
Okay. Oh,
it's not
wow.
just bleak. It's not just bleak. there's music, there's, yeah, joy.
Because it's sunny in LA.
Yes,
Go check
especially
it
on
out.
Skid Row. Yes.
Go
Thank you
check
so
it
much for
out.
having me.
Thank you for being on our program today. Our guest,
Mhm.
once again, Lorinda Hawkins-Smith. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.